Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reflect as we explore the rest of Revelation chapter 8, looking at the first four trumpets that are sounded. So let's begin by diving into the scripture and reading Revelation 8, verses 6 to 13. Then the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels." So as we come to this chapter, this part of the chapter, we've just completed a cycle of judgment with the seven seals on the scroll that were opened. And now we encounter a second cycle of judgment with seven angels blowing trumpets. And what we see in the judgment of the first four trumpets that we just read is its effect on creation. The first trumpet sounds, and hail and fire mixed with blood are hurled down on the earth. And the result is that a third of the earth and trees and all the green grass were burned up. This is an ecological disaster on an incredible scale. The image of hail as judgment is not a new one, being an image of a plague sent on Egypt back in the book of Exodus. Hail is mentioned in the book of Job, and even the psalmist referenced hail and lightning coming in the clouds. During the taking of the promised land in Joshua, we also see that Yahweh assists in the battle by sending large hailstones down on the enemy at the time. But this is a step up as the hail is mixed with blood, perhaps reminding us not just of the plague of hail in Egypt, but also the Nile being turned to blood. The second trumpet sounds, and we find here an ecological disaster located in the sea. Something like a huge fiery mountain is thrown into the sea, and this brings to mind a bit the image of a comet falling from the sky. And again, a third of the sea creatures and ships were destroyed. The third trumpet sounds, again bringing another ecological disaster, this time targeting all the fresh water, the drinking water, in the rivers and the springs. And this time it is a star that falls, and the image is even more certain in bringing to mind the image of a meteorite. And finally, we look at the fourth trumpet, which brings along disaster in the sky. A third of the celestial bodies are harmed, including a third of the day was without light, and a third of the night was without stars. Now, we keep in mind, this is apocalyptic imagery. It's not a scientific description of an event. It's communicating a message, not scientific fact. We know if a third of the stars were removed from the sky, we wouldn't experience no light, but diminished light. We know that. But the disaster and the scope of the disaster is so clear what is being communicated. The images are trying to show us not astronomical events, but the scope and impact of the act of God in judgment. Look at how comprehensive these four judgments are affecting all of creation. Creation is going into upheaval in anticipation of a new creation being brought about that we'll see later in Revelation. God is bringing about the end of the decay and bondage of creation so it can be made new again. We need to keep our eye on the long-term work in the story. If we stop here, we can be overwhelmed and scared. But we need to keep in mind that God is at work for something greater. One of the images we've come across in Revelation, that God is the victor. God wins. That's the context. And just like a renovation requires demolition, Revelation shows us the renewing of all things through Christ requires judgment and destruction, as hard as they are to read about. So we'll see you next time when we continue looking at the next trumpet. Thanks for watching this week. We'll talk to you next time.